Good morning. My face is a bit. It's these things. You take a video and you look different in one video from the next. I, I, I like to think I look quite macho in most of my videos, but I've seen a couple of them where I look like a wee twerp. So I'm trying to remedy that, just fix that, just come across as the man that I am, which is a true macho, testosterone, fucking overflowing, absolute fucking brute of a human being. So yeah, what's going on here is Carl Froch, George Groves. I think it's been 10 years since the first fight, which was Wembley Arena, I believe, and the next one was Wembley Stadium, 80,000 people. Lest we forget, Carl. Lest we forget. We never will now, because that has become a boxing catchphrase of the highest fucking degree. Yeah, and every time poor Georgie boy hears it, he'll be trembling. I'm just looking at their box recs here. We're gonna make sure we get all the details right, because we get the box rec. Carl's looking alright. He's looking quite tasty in this photograph here. I don't want to get too fruity, but he's looking alright there, man. He's got a nice fringe going on, a little bit of tousled hair. You can see why Rachel Froch was certainly swept up by this dapper young man. There you are, and this is pre-facial reconstruction as well, so he's looking good, man. He's looking good. So Carl Froch is notoriously fucking hard run, and beat everybody. Much different than his great rival and the guy he never got to fight, my favourite fighter, Joe Calzaghe. He just fought champion after champion. Well, let's see. Now, I did see they have a common opponent in Robin Reid. Let me see. He fought maybe 10 dossers, right? Fought for the English super middleweight vacant title against Alan Page. No idea who that is. Charles Adami, that name rings a bell. I was for the Commonwealth. So Adami, out of Africa or something, so that's part of the Commonwealth. The Brits are like, they just went on their mad conquest, didn't they, and just sequestered the rest of the world, and sort of just held us all, told us what to do. Still are, really, in a way. But it's all good. We can laugh about it now, can't we? We'll not get swept up in that stuff. So next up, Mark will know. Never heard of him. Damon Haig, never heard of him. Now that was for the British as well. So he got the British there. He done him in a round. Henry Porras, again, a few more guys. I'm sure these guys were all, respectable fighters, deserving of our esteem, but, we just don't know who they are, really. So Tony Dodson, there's a bit of Euro trash there. Sergi Tato, fucking Voyeurs, and Robin Reid. So he fights Robin Reid. He must have relinquished the Commonwealth belt by this time, and he goes in for the British Super Middle. He must have won that outright, which is sort of what you want to do. It's the Lonsdale belt, if I'm getting that right. It's a nice belt, and it's sort of one of the pit stops on your way to becoming a world champion for an elite fighter from Britain. That's sort of something that you want to do, yeah. Did you ever see the guy that used to do the horses? He wore the hat and all, and he had a bit of long hair, a nice bit of facial hair and stuff, and he was quite good, wasn't he? So anyway, Robin Reid, now, Calzaghe had a bad night with him. Some people argued that Robin Reid won that fight. I think Calzaghe won. Obviously, Robin Reid really put it on him. Calzaghe didn't have an easy night with him. Froch done him in 5 rounds. Take from that what you will. So on up, he faced Jean Pascal for his first world title fight. That was the WBC. Nice one to go in for first. Unanimous decision win. Great. Never fucking watched the fight, so that's as much as I can tell you about that. Jermaine Taylor was next. That was the TKO in the 12th round. That's the one where he was severely under the cosh the whole fight, man. It didn't look good. Jermaine Taylor, great boxer. Um, Froch, not really a skilled, slick fighter, you know. No secrets there. I think Froch had a great jab, piston jab, a far-reaching jab, idiosyncratic style, reaching forward with a jab with the right hand, coming out backwards like that. The way he stepped forward and stepped in with shots, and of course iron chin and all of the intangibles leveled right up to the fucking max. He fought Durrell next then. He came back in that fight to knock him out in the 12th round, by the way, which was a real rocky moment. Um, I'm not sure in context of how that was at the time and him coming up as a fighter. You know, it must have done wonders for him and his reputation. 2 world title fights. Well, that was his first defence. So, I mean, he didn't want to let go of that world title. You know, a lot of fighters would have fucking copped out. Not Carl Froch. Anyway, Andre Durrell up next. Split decision win. Got the win. Mikhail Kessler. This must have been into the Super 6 by this stage. There was a bit of adversity there with the Ash Cloud. He was beat by Kessler. Kessler was a very good fighter. You see how good he was in the Calzaghe fight. He was unified champion when Calzaghe fought him. Very good boxer. What more is there to say? Likeable guy. Arthur Abraham up next, motherfucker. So that was for the WBC. Now, that was vacated by Kessler. It was maybe Kessler got injured. I'm not sure what the story was there. But he goes in and he gets the decision, unanimous decision. Over Arthur Abraham, Glenn Johnson then, another American fighter. Majority decision there. A lot of decision ones here. Something on my mind, I thought he was whacking all these guys out. Andre Ward up next. Famously, he had a lot of trouble with Andre Ward, and he wasn't altogether you could sympathise with him, and that Andre Ward was a dirty fighter when he needed to be. Like, he got in close, he clinched similarly the way I detested Bernard Hopkins. You know, those negative tactics, the spoiling, clinching, headbutts, elbows, everything. Now, having since studied Andre Ward and looked at a lot of his fights, I really like Andre Ward. I like him as a fighter. I like him as a personality, and I sort of had to go and study him because of the esteem that he was held in by his countrymen in particular, and a lot of other boxers. Where I had to see what the hype was all about. So, I mean, no shame at all in losing to Kessler and losing to Ward. And it's sort of like a throwback to the old days as well, where it wasn't, oh, you've lost your things are all over. Not for Carl Froch, man. Carl Froch, 4-time world champion. Yeah, the man just doesn't stop. Lucien Butte next, that was an amazing fight. He was, I'm not sure if that was his first fight with Matchroom. I don't think it was, but it was kind of a homecoming. Lucien Butte was highly rated, very good fighter. Froch just trounced him. Like, Froch just went in. I suppose he was coming in with a Super 6 experience, the confidence he had took from that. Even having lost a couple of fights, he didn't lose them outright. He wasn't badly beaten, and he got a couple of good wins in there as well. He came in and he just trounced Butte, and it was such a dramatic moment. Which these are the things that will live long in our memory, and these are the things that we live for in boxing. Forget the tippy tappy stuff and aficionados and the skills and all the rest of it, you want to see knockouts and you want these moments. Yusuf Mack, fucking Yusuf Latif, no idea who that is. Cat Stevens shit going on there. He fought Kessler then. I remember watching this in the bar, in the Hudson bar in Belfast, which is now known as Haymarket. I told a wee story about the other day. I remember watching it down there. Great fight. The two of them more or less stood toe to toe and just fucking winged hooks at each other all night. Two great chins, and another spectacle. And, this is where you gotta give respect to Carl Froch as well. He always delivered in those terms. It was always drama and it was always a spectacle. Now, if you draw the comparison with Calzaghe was fancy and great to watch for skills and stuff like that. And there was a dramatic element there, and he was an entertainer. Carl Froch was like fucking blood and guts and pure English, Polish madness, a warrior of the highest caliber. Next up, we have Georgie Boy. Now, let's see, when was this? Have we got a date here? Is BoxRec going to help us out? Yeah, so that was November 2013. Yeah. So, before we get to that, we'll have a quick look at what George Groves has got going on here with his record. Leading up to that fight, I will say I was a big fan of George Groves. I really liked George Groves. I had just been getting into boxing. I'd get into Amir Khan, Calzaghe. I got to know him a bit later. I didn't watch Calzaghe while he was active. I picked that up after. So I had a little bit of knowledge before I got to make a Calzaghe fanboy period. George Groves. Let's check George out in the picture. George is looking alright. George has got something going on top. He's got a nice natural growth of strawberry blonde hair. Just, yeah. He looks well. Nice and thin around the face, obviously. He was training hard. So George, I like George Groves a lot. A lot of people say he had a sort of like quasi, what's the fella's name? David Hay type of style in his movement, this stuff. Obviously, he was with Adam Smith as well. He had a great jab. I think everybody knew his jab was fantastic. So, now, before we get to Froch, he fought Glenn Johnson as well. The Gale fight was a big one, and the build up to that was when we first seen what Groves was capable of in terms of chit chat in the lead up to a fight and winding people up. And he had Chunky, another good fighter. He had Chunky, just his head was going. And it was interesting because George Groves was a young man. He was a young man, but he had an old head on his shoulders as far as that stuff went. And so he no massive names there on his way up, apart from Glenn Johnson. He was the right age by that time, but Groves was very young, so and I don't think he didn't have a load of fights before then. He was on about fucking 16 or 17 fights or something like that, so he wasn't really fighting the world caliber opponents. As the Carl Froch fight come around, he must have talked himself into it. And it come up. So it was for Carl's IBF and WBA titles. The build-up was insane. It's all there, it's all documented. I don't need to go into it too much, but I can say that I was a George Groves fan. I wasn't altogether comfortable watching. I wasn't altogether comfortable watching Carl Froch under pressure. I'm a very empathetic person. You might call an empath. I like to think I'm a compassionate sort of person, part of the reason why I'm empathetic and compassionate is because I don't like being hurt myself. So I don't. I try not to hurt other people. Now, whether that's out of a self-preservation thing, or whether that's also genuine altruistic love, I'm sure it's a bit of both, isn't it? So these guys, they went into that fight. George Gross was booed into the ring. George Gross got into the ring. Nobody was really giving him a shot. He was talking all this nonsense. I'm not sure if in terms of, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna hit you with two right hands and stuff. Well, he seemed so assured. Um, I'm not sure now. What was the story? Carl Froch. Uh, anyway, look, they get into the ring. George Gross did everything he said he was going to do in the first round. He put Carl Froch down unbelievably. He kept catching him with the right hand. And again, dramatic moments. It was like, fucking hell, this is amazing. And the crowd was starting to cheer and go crazy, not because they hated Carl Froch, and not because all of a sudden they loved George Groves, but because this was, suddenly the underdog is doing it. So that was great, I thought. And the first 4 or 5 rounds, Groves was having a lot of success. 5, 6, 7 rounds, I think. Froch got his foothold in the fight. He started to come in it. He started to catch Groves with hooks. He started to catch him with straight shots. Some of these, it's a funny thing with Carl Froch. They're like arm punches, and he sort of buckles them out like, it's like the whole shot. You think his arm's gonna come out of his socket, and like they seem a bit floppy, but the weight in the shots was incredible, and you could really see Grove started to fatigue. He was sort of pulling a little move that Calzaghe actually used to do. So Froch must have been a bit of a Calzaghe man. He was going like this here. He was going like that. I'm trying to think who was it who had hit Calzaghe when he was doing that. I think it might have been Hopkins, or it was Roy Jones. It was one or the other, but he was doing that. Kind of like, oh my God, I'm so knocked out. I'm so fucked. But I think with Groves, you could see that he was affected by these punches. And the thing about Groves too, being a red-haired fella with a pale skin, you could really see the markup. And I think Groves as well maybe it was because he invested so much energy mentally and physically in those first few rounds. He was sort of fatigued. He was tired. I'm not sure if that was the story of George Groves' engine throughout the rest of his career. It's maybe something that he learned to manage better as he come along. So anyway, we come to the 9th round. Groves has sort of cornered him more or less, or he had him up against the ropes. He was battering him like, and Howard Foster stepped in quite famously and waved it off. And Groves was heartbroken, he was crestfallen, he was just devastated. And he was crying and he was pleading. I know I certainly was like, oh no, Groves was going to win. But although even I could see, I didn't want to admit to myself, but I could see that Froch had the advantage by that point. Still a premature stoppage, really. But these things happen, and you have to accept it. And I'm sure George Groves accepts it by now. Maybe not. But and they had the interviews afterwards outside in the ring. at the turnbuckle. Or do they call it a fucking turnbuckle? And is that just wrestling? So fucking corner post, whatever you call that thing. So they were sitting there and they got a wee chat between the two of them. And like I say, obviously George was devastated. Froch was in a very difficult position too because the crowd were booing and hissing, and it was like he was having to argue his case and say, no, definitely, fair play to George. He got those early shots in and stuff. He took it by surprise there. I give him credit for that, but he had to make his case and demonstrate, like, I won the fight, and be sure of that. Anyway, the rematch was announced shortly afterwards. It was such a setup. I never actually watched the rematch. I don't know what happened, where it was, what went on that day. But Carl Froch knocked knocked him out with one punch. He got cobraed. And Judge Gross fell on his own leg. Apparently he was doing very well in that fight. I've never even watched that fight for some reason. Of course I seen the knockout and stuff. I think Gross was supposed to have done well. Anyway, the rest of Groves' career then, he fought that Christopher Rebras. I remember watching that fight. Dennis Dublin, I watched that fight as well. I watched these on TV. But Jack I didn't watch because that was early in the morning and stuff. So that was his fourth world title fight. And he lost that fight. And I was heartbroken again, just reading it on the boxing news the next day. I was heartbroken again, man. I love George Groves, and having come through the tumult and the drama of those two Groves fights, it made you see different sides of him. Of course, I should mention in the interim between the first and second fight, the first and second Froch Groves fight, that is, Froch had gained the upper hand suddenly in the back and forth, the chat and the build up. He went to see a sports psychologist and stuff. He got his head right, and he figured out a way to deal with this pesky George Groves. He suddenly took the higher ground. He says, wait a second, I'm a man, this is a boy, and that's the angle he played. And if you watch The Gloves Are Off, he really silenced George Groves. We can all have a push and a pull. So we can. So he fought Martin Murray. Martin Murray was a very good fighter. He fought was it Sergio Martinez, the middleweight world champion Argentinian guy. He was a great fighter too. I like to watch him. He hurt his leg and he couldn't do as much. But Edward Gutnicht, I think that might have been the one. Yeah, that was the one it says here where your man with the swelling to the brain, which is horrible, But what can you do? I'm sure that was very hard for Groves. Dealing with that, yeah, you just have to get on with them things, don't you? It's an accident, Next up was Chudinov, and he finally got the world title. I did watch that fight. I watched him knock him out, and it was brilliant, man. It was so good to see. Jimmy Cox up next. Jimmy Cox was a good fighter. That was the first fight then in the World Super Series, or whatever they call that. Froch fought in the Super 6. This was the Super Series, wasn't it? They had the cup and that, the Cali and all that. Jimmy Cox beat Jimmy Cox, knocked him out in the fourth round. Chris Eubanks Jr. then was up next. He beat Eubanks Jr. I didn't see that fight at the time. I remember being out at the bar one night and I got talking to a guy who was a boxer. He could have turned pro, this fella, but he didn't want to get into the life. He didn't, he wanted to go to the pub and have a few beers and stuff. He had been in the amateur system for a long time. Belfast guy, obviously, West Belfast guy. and he was quite capable. Like what he says, he still kept his hand in doing a bit of coaching and stuff like that. Bits and pieces. So, uh, but he showed me at that time. I really had no idea about boxing, but I enjoyed watching it. But in terms of like a practical sense, which I still don't really. Of course I do a wee bit of shadow boxing, and I like to think I can break things down technically. I think I'm okay for somebody who wasn't who hasn't really boxed, but this guy was able to show me different little things that I otherwise wouldn't have known. And he showed me a movie says what George Grove was doing with Eubank in that fight. He was turning them around. And he just pulled a strange move on me. I don't know what he fucked. It's almost like he grabbed my belt by two different sides and he flipped me around like that. I was like, what the fuck? Well, one minute he was there, the next he wasn't. So it was nice to have some of that explained. And Eubank Junior won that fight, unanimous decision. That was for Junior's IBO world title too. Another little trinket uh, for the cabinet. Then it was Callum Smith now. In the closing rounds of that Eubank fight, Groves had dislocated his shoulder. Went on to win the fight. True heart of a champion. Didn't cry, didn't fucking complain. He gets stuck in, and he got the job done. I remember him saying after, they had the Callum Smith fight, and it was scheduled because it was this World Super Series, everything was put in place. They couldn't put the fight back. His only other option was to drop out. I remember him saying at the time that he was a quick healer. I was in my spiritual bipolar psychosis, spiritual awakening sort of journey at that time, and he's a quick healer. For some reason, the word healer really jumped out at me, and I got all sorts of strange ideas about what George Groves might be, but I think he meant that he would heal quick from an injury, is what he meant from that. So anyway, he went in against Callum Smith. He hadn't fully recovered. Again, no complaints. He went in. I've seen in interviews and stuff. George Groves doesn't make that excuse. But if somebody's talking to him about the fight, especially a fellow boxer, usually they'll make reference to it. George Groves doesn't make a big thing out of it, and he could. That's probably why he probably would have beat Callum Smith. Obviously, Callum Smith's a great puncher. There's always that danger there. But the guys he was knocking out before he came up against Groves weren't really on Groves' level and Groves' experience. Groves' level of experience either. And if you look at what he went on to do since, not to get at Callum Smith, I think he's a real nice guy and he's a good fighter. I like all the Smith brothers. But he had got a lucky enough decision over John Ryder. Before Canelo, didn't go so well for him. But again, it was Canelo, so it is what it is there. And then he had maybe a couple of smaller fights, and then he went on and he fought a better BF, but that guy's just a beast, isn't he? So yeah, light heavyweight, man, light heavyweight. It's interesting, and it'll be interesting to see what happens when he comes up against Bivol. I think he'll destroy Bivol. I think he will destroy him. Bivol's a great boxer, but he needs room to work. Beterbiev doesn't give you room to work. He gets right on top of you, and the pressure's immense. And he can box too, not in a classic straight boxing style, more of a pressure, swarmer, but a very educated swarmer. So yeah, I think it'll be good. I think it'll be good, man. So there you are. That's my wee rundown of the George Groves, Carl Froch thing. I quite like watching the two of them. You know, they do a bit of stuff on Froch on fighting, and I think they do some on Talk Sport as well. Talk Sport's a strange one, you know. It's a strange setup there. You've got Simon Jordan and all of these guys. It's like it kind of feels like being back in school. It's like, oh, there's the headmaster. There's fucking, oh, there's the head boy. You know, prep and all this stuff. You know, there's sort of like a little packing order and another set of rules by which one must play. But I suppose it's all very gentlemanly. Uh, and it's interesting to check out. Although I do prefer when they're just being themselves and having a laugh, to be quite honest. So anyway, that's all the crack there, guys. A couple of fights last night, the night before. Shaquille Foster, I'm not sure. Another guy, Curiel. I haven't really looked at that stuff. Wasn't awake to see the fights. But yeah, maybe I'll do something on that later. We'll see. I have a friend, a particular guy who never misses a fight, so I might be able to get some information off him. And we'll take it from there. Have a lovely Saturday, guys, you know. Fucking just do it now.